very much. I will be, and you will be, very frustrated by this debate, precisely because it's quite complicated, and it would need a much longer time, both to deal with the comparative aspect of capitalist restoration in China, Russia, and elsewhere. That is, Eastern Europe is not Russia, and so on. And second, to have a political appreciation of well, the evolution of world globalized capitalist system and the place of those powers in it. So, as I will focus, of course, on China, and I will more focus a little bit on Russia, but I would first, so I will raise 3 points. Why are we questioning, of course, what is the nature of those new powers, imperialist or progressive, and so on, because, of course, of the necessity of political clear standpoint in key important issues. So the first statement I will not develop, but I want to begin with, is a global judgment on 1989 global turn within the global phase of neoliberal anti-social, counter-revolutionary, in a way, so-called neoliberal phases. 1989, both in China and in Russia and Eastern Europe, meant a turning point towards capitalist restoration, as it was said, and it had an international, disastrous social and political effect for the working class. I don't want to develop this, but this is a key point to be stressed in the beginning against any idea that even the development of multipolar kind of world means any progressive aspect on the side of China and Russia, I would say. That's, I don't develop, but that's the first standpoint. And in the European Union, especially around the question of the continent transformation after '89, I think the German unification and then destruction and collapse of Soviet Union and the other capitalist transformation in the whole continent in Eastern Europe played a key role in the disastrous anti-social and anti-democratic radicalization of the neoliberal European project. So this is the first point to stress. Linked with that, I would say also that the idea that the so-called BRICS, as new powers and so on, represent any kind of consistent and progressive alternative to capitalist domination, imperialist domination, is on my point of view, completely wrong. Besides the fact that there should not be any idea of an homogeneous regroupment. And of course there is a specificity, even in the capacity to have some conflicting relationship with dominant old imperialist powers like US. There is a strong difference between Russia and China on one hand, and the other ones. On military expenses and possibility of confrontation, even if it's not an anti-capitalist confrontation and progressive one. So this for the BRICS. Second point, very rapidly, to stress some differences between Russia and China as far as the scenario of capitalist restoration is concerned. I will develop, I am supporting much what he has written on China. I would like very much that we organize at an international level a systematic analysis, comparative analysis. But altogether, I agree with the fact that what he says himself for China, but it's a general point, I would argue, that capitalist restoration is not only something which comes from external pressure. There is an external, internal element of turning point with the political and social choices of actors, concrete actors. And one of the big differences between Russia and China is that in the first phase of capitalist restoration in Russia, you had what we could call a kind of comprador bourgeoisie dominating, if we can say dominating Russia, that is Yeltsin. And Yeltsin was organically linked with external pressures and powers and influence and financial and so on to accomplish two main goals, which were the goals that US imperialists want to fulfill in Russia. That is destruction of Soviet Union and capitalist restoration. And Yeltsin did both. I cannot develop. You can read the article called From the Short Soviet Century to Putin's Russia, which is online, or which I wrote, which develop different phases and so on. That is to say that we must make a big difference between the Yeltsin years and Putin years, and between Russia as a whole and China. During Yeltsin years, that in the 19th, Russia, the industry of Russia has been completely destroyed, very much, more than 50% decrease in GDP and so on, and up to the turning point was 89, when there was the financial crisis and the non-payment crisis. Still the end of Yeltsin era, but it was the beginning of a more protectionist kind of orientation, and then Putin came into power. But during those years, it was a destruction with domination of oligarchs on the state, privatization of the state by oligarchs with regional conflicts and so on, and destruction of the both internal and international strength of the state, even the capacity to raise taxes was destroyed in that period. There was no real market unification in that sense. The dominant relationship were barter up to 98, but there was real beginning of capitalist accumulation through external relationship, currencies from international trade, in oil, in raw material and so on, but with flow of capital out of Russia, not invested in Russia. So a destruction of that society and for the working class, of course, but also for the whole industry and strength of the state itself. So Putin's period came closer to and tried to have more lessons to be driven from the China's experience. That is to build what Ao calls bureaucratic capitalism. I like very much his concept. So I don't develop here, but Putin is trying to restructure first the capacity to control taxes and its own oligarchs, and to try and restructure its influence around the Russia. So there were then the beginning of a new kind of what Gilbert Achcar has called, which can be discussed, a new kind of phase of Cold War in international relationship between Russia and US. I don't believe this Cold War concept is completely adequate at all, but there are elements of truth there. First of all, there was the absolutely extension of NATO up to and integration of Eastern European countries within both NATO and European Union, and there were the conflicts, increasing conflicting view about the control of the issue of oil in the former republics on the Aegean part of the territory, and but there were also some collaboration. I mean, the so-called anti-terrorist war after 11/9, 2001. I mean, even Putin was in agreement with the U.S. powers to share this so-called anti-terrorist war, and it is up to now on the Chechnya, and also offering its offering today to Obama its services to deal with the Syrian conflicts and so on. So I said there are elements of Cold War, but in a completely new world, where there are also common interests, like the one I said, between those big powers, but also conflicts. And conflicting period around 2003, 4, 5, around what was called the Colored Revolution, including Ukraine. That is, and Brzezinski's speech about the need to win Ukraine towards the Western camp, and in general, there is no disagreement on the fact that there had been huge amounts of money spent by U.S. Administrations and so on to try and win forces in all these the countries which are between Russia and European Union. Which were conflicting, confronted to conflicting projects. One from Russia, Putin's Russia, to build a Euro-Asiatic Union, which is an ongoing project, and the other, which came from under the pressure of Poland, particularly within the European Union, to integrate the very same six countries between the Russia and European Union within not within the European Union, but within radical trade, so-called free trade agreements as new kind of partenariat. I don't know what is the English. So yeah, so you had a period of increasing kind of conflict of that kind. And I will now go on. I will come back on the limitation of that interpretation of a Cold War to deal with the third point in that short period of intervention I wanted to raise against all campism. Around the Ukrainian affair, I think Marco will, of course, develop more the analysis on that point. But I wanted to come back on that turning point. Georgia in 2008 was the first point, and Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea was the second point, where it's true that Putin came back in the sphere of international relationship with a behavior of great power, and which produced within US certainly also an increasing speech also of Cold War. Certain commentators speak of Grey War and so on. And there are probably divisions among the US administration how to deal with Russia. But I want to argue against all the new phase within the radical left, and especially in Europe, of what were the kind of opposition, polarization and campist views, which occurred already when there was the Kosovo issue and NATO issue. And at that time, I already, and within the international also, we had a position which opposed campism. What does it mean, campism? Campism is to choose a main enemy, and then to back it and refuse criticism within that camp, because it would help precisely the enemy. And with the logics, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. This was already a political debate within the far left at the time of the Kosovo. And of course, Milosevic was not Putin. And the discussion, was he imperialist, would be stupid. So the position I defended, and I still defend, is not the idea that there are equilibriate imperialist or great power forces. That's not the issue. First of all, I defended, and I still defend, a threefold kind of position. Neither nor for. At that time it was neither Milosevic nor NATO, but for self-determination of Albanians and of peoples of the regions. And today that would be the same. Neither, the Western policies, being through NATO or being through European Union, or with the direct, of course, support of the Kiev government in that policy, nor Putin's, but for self-determination. And of course, when I said that this neither nor is not an abstract analysis, it's an algebraic, combinaison algebraic combination. You see what I mean? But I mean, what is dominant depends on what is the issue you want to stress. If you want to make the analysis of what is the dominant imperialist at the world level, there is no hesitation, and there was a brilliant report just before. US, no problem. And that is why also we had to fight against the continuation and redevelopment of NATO also, and so-called war against terrorism in the world, with the free possibility of intervention of US power with its own rules and so on. That is absolutely needed. Secondly, if you take in account the socialist project, the anti-capitalist project, and Milosevic as claiming even more than Putin. Putin doesn't claim to be socialist, but Milosevic claimed it. So to be socialist. I mean, it was a disaster for immediate and very short-term resistance. And the rebuilding of alternative in the Balkan, it is very important to stand, to have positioned completely independent and critical from great Serbian policies. You don't need to call it imperialist, it's great Serbian, like it was great Russian. And it's better to use this formulation to criticize a policy of domination than to use the term imperialist without any criteria. I mean, we can discuss them, but we don't need that Milosevic or Putin be imperialist, even if Putin can be eventually, it is, to be against any kind of policy which would impose through military and also through gas wars and all kind of chantage, blackmail. No, chantage, yes, economic blackmail and so on the people of the former Soviet republics, that they belong to Russia. This is not acceptable 1 minute. So then within Ukraine there can be different choices. I don't believe that Putin's Russia is so attractive, even in Russian-speaking sphere of Ukrainian, but I do so, and I So I do believe we have to oppose clearly on the point of view of building alternatives to existing order, which is globalized order, to fight against campism of all sides. And I want to argue on one point, which is, of course, very important for anti-imperialist people. Some of our comrades or close currents from the left would say we have to fight first against our own imperialism. This is a good argument, but not enough. Why is it? Well, with this kind of argument, it would be fine to say that when you are in Russia, the main emphasis could be against Russia, and when we are here in the European Union, the main emphasis could be against NATO and UN. I think this is acceptable, but not enough and not efficient. Why? But precisely because concretely, and I had that argument with some comrade of Die Linke in Germany, when they say what we have to develop our argument against the dominant press, so in order to make their argument against their own bourgeoisie, they had to qualify Maidan as fascist without a concrete analysis of the social movement, or completely subordinated to US. But anyway, I say, even if we take in account your point of view, I said to those the Linke comrade, that is focusing against NATO. What had been the main argument to consolidate NATO? It has been Putin's intervention. Now NATO is more popular in Ukraine, in Baltic regions, in Poland, and so on than it was before, and stronger to consolidate in a way. But on the other side, if you want to defeat Putin's policy and great powers policy with its alliance with very rightist currents, both in the European Union and within the Soviet Union, with a very rightist reactionary ideology and so on the great Russian New World and so on, if you want to defeat this, you have to fight against NATO and to denounce the NATO's expansion and all which is true in the so-called Cold War, but partly through Cold War and Brzezinski kind of speeches. So it is not efficient, not enough to be against your own bourgeoisie. You have to combine on all fronts, and you have to try and build, even if it is very difficult, an alternative. This alternative is anti-capitalist on all sides. And that's why the Cold War concept is not satisfactory neither. In fact, if you look at the scene, political scene behind the Ukrainian affair, you see that there are strong interests between Russia and European Union. The main direct investment in Russia are from European Union. The main trade is with European Union. And so now Russia is turning towards China to strengthen a possible relationship of forces in world negotiation. They together built some specific Asian banks which try to resist to the dominance of IMF and to the dependency upon the dollars, but there are strong, close interests between Germany and Russia on energy. They have negotiated directly with Russia the channel to deliver all. Same for Italy. And France was very much interested in very close negotiation on the modernization of the Russian armament industry. And in the London financial sphere, I mean, the Russian oligarchs are very well known. So, I mean, we are no more in a situation where you have conflicting systems. It's a global capitalism with multipolar, it's true, multipolar increasing powers, conflicting on financial, on energy, on alliance and so on, but with close interests. And the main interest, I said before, and I close on that, is the social interest. Putin didn't want any kind of Maidan in his own country, and that's why he intervened, mainly. So,